The Pentagon, meanwhile, ordering 8,500 troops on standby for potential deployment to Eastern Europe as tensions are rising over Russia's troop buildup on the border of Ukraine. If activated, they would deploy to NATO frontline nations like Poland and Lithuania, but they would not be authorized to enter Ukraine. Fox News national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin now pressed Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby on this plan. Watch this.
If NATO is a defensive alliance and these troops, if they are activated, are defensive and therefore frontline NATO states, how does this protect Ukraine? How does it stop Putin from going into Ukraine?
It's designed to reassure our NATO allies, Jen. It's designed to reassure our NATO allies.
How does it protect Ukraine?
It sends a very clear signal to Mr. Putin that we take our responsibilities to NATO seriously.
It's a great question from Jennifer. Joining me right now is Ronald Reagan Institute Director and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Roger Zakheim. And Roger, it's good to have you this morning here. Thanks very much. What do you think the answer is to that question? 8,500 troops now on alert. Is this helping Ukraine?
Well, it sends a message to Putin that he can't extend beyond Ukraine to other NATO allies. That's the key message. Putin has extended his presence not just into the border of Ukraine through Russia, but also through Belarus. That puts pressure on countries like Poland and the Baltics. And we need to make a clear signal to Putin that the United States and NATO will not tolerate any adventurism into NATO states. But that's not enough to support Ukraine. And I think Jennifer Griffin was making that point to the Pentagon spokesman.
Yeah, during a press briefing yesterday, State Department spokesperson Ned Price was arguing that ending the war in Afghanistan has allowed the U.S. to be more strategically positioned to address Russia. This you've got to explain to me. Watch this.
Is the Biden administration aware of how critical the whole world is watching, just like what happened in Afghanistan?
I have a hard time understanding how it is that putting an end to a 20-year military commitment where the United States spent billions upon billions of dollars every year, where thousands of American troops, at one point tens of thousands of American troops were stationed, where there was a NATO commitment, where thousands of NATO troops were stationed for many years, taking casualties, enduring the loss of life, with an open-ended military commitment. How were that still to be the case, how we would be better strategically positioned to take on what we're seeing now from the Russian Federation.
Oh, wow, Roger, a lot of spin there, but I don't know how you could point to the botched Afghanistan withdrawal as being any kind of a model, but what's your reaction to what you just heard?
It seems to be that the Biden administration is trying to make an argument here about military capability, that somehow having a couple thousand troops deployed in Afghanistan or not having them there anymore helps us in Europe, helps us deal with the Ukraine crisis. The reality is Vladimir Putin looked at Afghanistan and saw that there's a question about the Biden administration's willingness to defend freedom, to deter adversaries. And that's the crisis we have in Ukraine. Will the West, will the United States, will Europe stand up to aggression? That's the vulnerability that we saw come out of the crisis in Afghanistan. And that, frankly, is the challenge we're facing in Ukraine right now.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about, because we don't know if Europe is with us or not. The president keeps saying the U.S. and its allies, but we know that Germany is completely reliant on Russia for gas now that President Biden allowed that Nord Stream pipeline to flow gasoline and gas and oil into Europe, specifically Germany. Here's what Senator Tom Cotton told me on Sunday about where Germany is in all of this. Watch this.
Germany has not only refused to provide Ukraine with anti-armor and anti-aircraft weapons, they're actually blocking other NATO countries from providing those weapons to Ukraine. This is in part because Germany is now so dependent on Russian gas. Look, Germany made extremely poor policy choices about energy over the last decade, shutting down all of its nuclear power plants, for instance. That made them even more dependent than they already were on Russian gas.
Roger, your thoughts?
Senator Collins, correct. Germany, to this point, cares more about cheap gas and its energy sources from Russia than it does about the freedom of Ukraine or deterring Vladimir Putin's aggression. They are betting, or Vladimir Putin is betting, that Germany will continue to take that posture. The question is, as 100,000 Russian troops deploy around Ukraine, will Germany's posture change? Will the EU and NATO's posture change? And the reality is, it seems to be doing so. Will they tolerate this aggression into Ukraine? And that's what the Biden administration is working on at this point. That's why we have 8,500 troops on alert. That's why you have the deployment of aircraft and ships from NATO allies. More has to be done. They need to give Ukraine capability, the kind that Senator Cotton just outlined, to make sure they can counter Russian aggression. If the Ukrainian people want the support of the West, want the support of NATO in the form of anti-tank, anti-ship missiles, we ought to give it to them.
Yeah, but I mean, all of this perception of weak leadership is getting all of our adversaries going, not just Russia, China flying planes into Taiwan's defense airspace, Iran backing the Houthis, who are now attacking aggressively Abu Dhabi. Roger, is there any coincidence this is happening now?
Well, I think in the case of China, this is the Chinese saying, can the United States walk and chew gum at the same time? Can they deal with a crisis on the European continent, at the same time deter and engage in the deterrence with respect to China and Taiwan? And we have a deployment of aircraft carriers in the South China Sea at the moment. But the Chinese are kicking the tires and seeing if the United States has resolve. As you pointed out, deterrence is not just about military capability. It's about, do we have the will and intent to do something about aggression?
All right, Roger, we'll leave it there. Great to have you on and to check in with you. Roger Zakheim joining us. We'll see you soon.